Now to talk about the texture and the timbre. So much like the Michael Jackson track we looked at last week, the texture is pretty constant throughout the song, as it is still meant to be a dance track and descended from hip-hop and rap with these looping samples that disc jockeys might put on. So even when the technology became more sophisticated, that looping aesthetic was still very much part of the style. Now for the melodic layer, the melody, you have the rap and the synth arpeggiation, as I mentioned earlier, the chord, that sort of electric guitar-like comping synth. For the bass, you have the synth bass riff, dun-dun-dun-dun-dun, and the drum machine loop, dun-gat-dun-dun, gat-dun-dun. And that's pretty much constant throughout the entire song. But the question is, do we have a novelty layer? The same question that we've asked in a previous tuning in video. And the answer is yes. This I'll play in just a bit, but we have some examples of sound design. Things like broken glass, a ratchet, or an outro scene with voices and sirens and other shouts and sort of the sounds of a scuffle. That all plays the role of a novelty layer and contributes to both making the track unique and also playing into its overall narrative. Now, in terms of the timbre of the track, the message and in general early hip-hop and rap presents a competing musical vision with that of rock, and the idea of the song in general, whether it be in rock, folk, pop, or another genre. And that is that this gives a more dark tone with rougher instrumentals, things that have a high attack and low sustains, particularly in the beat and the chord layers, such as that comping electric guitar sounding synth. In terms of the vocal timbre, or the timbre of the rappers themselves, you do hear the progression that we'll talk about in the form section of the rappers growing increasingly more frustrated or even aggressive over the course of several verses. And when you get that refrain in the chorus of, "Don't push me, 'cause I'm close to the edge, I'm trying not to lose my head," and then there's sort of like a laugh, ha 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 ha, which at first maybe sounds defiant, but over the course of the song starts to sound a little more kind of disturbed, more unbalanced because of the things that they're seeing and describing. So in some choruses in a traditional song, the singer might just record it once, get it all good, and then basically use the same recorded vocal over each chorus, because if the chorus is the same, why reinvent the wheel? However, in the message, you actually have the chorus performed separately each time, sometimes by a different singer, and always in a different way, so you sort of have this progression of increasing frustration or aggressiveness.
My son said, "Daddy, I don't want to go to school because the teacher's a jerk. He must think I'm a fool and all the kids smoke reefer. I think it'd be cheaper if I just got a job, learn to be a street sweeper."
Now for form, and here's where we can really start to break things down a great deal more. So the form of the song is in what's known by the scholar Jay Sumach as super simple verse-chorus form. Now I have a little bit of tension with this because I think it kind of unfairly simplifies or sort of biases against hip-hop and rap type music, which has its own values. I've used different words before, like ostinato-based form or sometimes even teleological-based form. So I kind of want to play with this more. But the idea behind super simple verse-chorus is that there's just a verse and chorus in alternation. It kind of goes verse-chorus, instrumental, verse-chorus, verse-chorus. There might be a bridge, and there is one, but not really a pre-chorus to it. And then here's the key to why it's a super simple verse-chorus form. This is because there's a little musical change between the verse and the chorus. You don't really have this trajectory of verse leading to the chorus as a high point. It's mostly the lyrics that do the changing. And so the music stays looping, stays very much the same, and it's only the lyrics that sort of orient you as being in the verse or being in the chorus. Now, each cycle in the form is marked generally by a change in speaker. Now, Melly Mel raps cycles 1, 2, and then comes back at the end for 5, while Duke Booty raps cycles 3 and 4. There are occasional instrumental interludes, which provide some space and some time between cycles. Now, there is also a bridge between cycles 4 and 5, which is a little more extended than just the instrumental interlude. And here it features a filter sweep, which you'll hear in the excerpt in a second. It kind of sounds like, so like you'll hear this sort of rising or like rapidly sweeping sound, which is done by taking an equalizer and sort of unrevealing part of the spectrum at a time. So starting very narrow and then widening out either towards the higher end or towards the lower end to give this sweeping sound. Now, one thing I do think is interesting and significant is that there are progressive stanzas used in this track. That is progressive in terms of increasing in length. For verse 1, you have only 8 measures, so pretty brief. Verse 2, you have 11 bars. Verse 3, 13. 4, 16, and finally in verse 5, a whopping 28. This creates a sense of the track's growing intensity of the verses, that every verse you're sort of adding on more and more thoughts, more lyrics, more imagery, and that we're building to something which ends up being this outro scene. So this is a way of doing show, don't tell storytelling, where it's not just sort of telling you, hey, things are getting worse, things are getting more intense, but it's actually in the musical form itself encoded with this slow build-up, slow and gradual build-up. Now for the outro of the track, we have a scene, like a dramatic scene, which is unique in that not a lot of songs were doing it. We did have stuff that was similar in Michael Jackson, for example, with the music videos, but otherwise for just a track to be played on a record or on the radio, not so much. But in this scene, the rapping duo is suddenly arrested by police who come upon them and sort of refuse to hear their protest. So they're arrested for seemingly no reason, as the police are saying, are you in a gang? Like, come on, we're going to take you down to the station, and get stuffed in a police car. So this is an icon of police brutality within these urban environments to show sort of the threat or the fear towards the police officers that those in this community often had.
So don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
Yo, Mel, you see that girl, man?
Yeah, man.
Yo, that sound like Cowboy, man.
Cool.
Yo, what's up, money?
Yo.
Hey, where's Bill and Raheem, man?
They upstairs cooling out.
So what's up for the night, y'all?
Yo, we can go down to Viva, man.
Check out Junebug, man. Hey, yo, you know that girl Betty? Yeah, man.
finally, we're going to talk about the lyrics for the track, and there is a lot here to talk about. And in fact, you're really going to have to just go and listen to the song itself because I won't be able to cover everything, but I'll be able to give an overview. Now, I do want to mention that the lyrics, and in general for the rap weeks, have quite a bit more explicit content, both in terms of sort of anachronistic, not as politically correct terms to use, as well as just expletives that are used quite frequently. I don't mind communicating those when it's appropriate, but I found that I could make the points today in the message without necessarily re-quoting those. So the themes of the message center around the cycles of poverty, of inequality, and of racial discrimination, particularly in urban environments, such as police brutality, which we just mentioned. Now, I want to start with the chorus, actually, which comes back time and time again. It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under. So that comes back several times. In fact, the track starts with that, and it really goes to give the sense of the mood of existing within this urban New York City space. Then we have the refrain that we've already mentioned several times, that double tresillo. Don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. Ha 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 ha. So that really gives a sense of, this increasing frustration, this increasing pressure that's being placed upon these black men. Now in verses 1 through 2, Melle Mel really sets up the imagery well of this urban environment, which is so often stricken by poverty and inequality. There's imagery used of broken glass littering the streets, of rats and roaches in the residences, of junkies on the streets, and of what Melle Mel refers to as a crazy woman eating out of garbage pails. By the way, this woman in the street kind of becomes a character of her own that the camera focuses on for verse 2, so it's definitely worth checking out how that woman is described. There's a bit more sort of explicit content there than I feel like laying out in this particular slide. Now in verses 3 and 4, the perspective shifts to focus on the family of the speaker, particularly Duke Booty in this case. So you have a number of different scenes, sort of vignettes that give a sense of the desperation among this community, such as, my brother is doing bad, stole my mother's TV, and then the bill collectors scare my wife when I'm not home, kind of it's like intimidation to try to wrangle some money. And then Duke Booty talks about his son dropping out or wanting to drop out of school, saying it would be better if I didn't go to school and if I just got a job and started working to save up money, because as the son says through Duke Booty, the teacher's a jerk, he must think I'm a fool. So not only is there rampant poverty described in the song, but also there's no social mobility because accessing social mobility through education is being stacked against them because the education system might be sort of looking down on them or even turning against them in a systemic way. Then verse 4 also sort of builds, again with these sort of longer verses, towards a description of street crime. And there are a couple of really vivid images that I won't go into detail for, but one of the lines references push that girl in front of the train, as well as another man stab that man right in his heart. So a couple of deaths on the street, which are unfortunately commonplace for the speakers, and almost described in a sort of dispassionate way, but as the imagery is showing things spiraling more and more out of control and more desperation rising. And so this leads to verse 5 and Epiphany, when Melle Mel comes back to speak, and you have what almost sounds like the moral of the story, sort of more of a commentary from a big picture perspective. This is a technique that we also saw in Dolly Parton's Coat of Many Colors, sort of the last verse trying to give more of a summary of how things stand, how the speakers are trying to communicate with the audience. And here we hear Melle Mel say lines like the following. A child is born with no state of mind, blind to the ways of mankind. So here there's sort of a sense of we're all born equal, that we're born with a blank slate, and it's up to society to train people as they grow into things like discrimination or certain social roles, looking down on other people, and sort of maybe believing in the justice of the system even though it treats one community of people so much worse. Then we have lines like this. God is smiling on you, but he's frowning too. And there's sort of a reference of only God will see what you're going through, this sense of like the rough conditions in the urban environment. And I finally wanted to highlight this line, which isn't even sort of the closing or most intense image of verse 5, but one I thought really stood out and helped to show the point of the message well, which is, your eyes will sing a song of deep hate. So again, kind of as the aggression builds in the tone and in the rhythms and in even the increasing density of the texture, this line, your eyes will sing a song of deep hate, really goes to contribute to the sense of aggression and desperation within this urban environment. However, I want to emphasize that this is presented not in a way to blame the individual as if they're just like a despicable person, but really to show how they're a product of the environment that they're being raised in on a day-to-day basis and can't get out. As we've mentioned, this cyclical sense of looping music in this one chord loop that never changes because in this landscape, everything is the same day in and day out. And that, class, is The Message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, mostly really the Furious Five, Melle Mel and Duke Booty here. So I hope you enjoyed that and getting to learn just a little bit about another take on some similar themes that we saw in Straight Outta Compton.